very good afternoon to all, and welcome back to the second session in this lecture series. So in this, we take a technical dive into blockchain. We go over its history, some of the key points in its milestones, and its evolution. We'll see what's called the consensus mechanisms, which are like the driving force, the fundamental battery that follows the blockchain, and then we'll see some real-world applications. So as I said earlier, there will be one more session following this, and I was told to finish roughly around 3:45. So I'll aim to go a bit fast with these two sessions, try to finish both in about half an hour. Okay, so let's get into it. This is the outline for this talk. We go over the history, some of key milestones, the working of the blockchain, the algorithms that go into it, consensus mechanisms, we'll see what they are, and some of the types of consensus mechanisms, the advantages and disadvantages, and a couple of things which we touched upon in the morning about the blockchain being forbidden or sometimes being subjected to some crude regulations in various countries. A couple of things which I found funny about the blockchain, and some projected goals for the future of blockchain. Starting with the history of blockchain. Many people might not be knowing that blockchain, properly speaking, starts in 1991. We're all familiar with the popular history that's evident from 2008 onwards. But two computer scientists, Stewart and Scott, they attempted to create a kind of timestamp, a digital timestamp, which would have this property of undeniability. So that later on, no one would be able to deny that this document was created at this time. So they did some work on that, which was the real foundation of blockchain. So properly speaking, blockchain starts in 1991 with those two gentlemen, Stewart and Scott. And then in 2009 we had this famous paper, what we call the white paper on Bitcoin, on blockchain, by Satoshi Nakamoto. And even now, after almost 15 years, we do not know who that person was, whether it was a person or a group or what, we do not know. And in 2010, we had the very first transaction using Bitcoin. I'll come back to that one towards the end of the slide. And from then on, Bitcoin was gaining more and more popularity. And in 2014, another computer scientist by name Vitalik Buterin, he proposed a different kind of blockchain. So far the only blockchain that we know was the one that was fundamental to Bitcoin, which uses proof of work. In 2014, a different kind of blockchain called the Ethereum was proposed by Vitalik Buterin, and it expanded more on the idea of blockchain. So far, blockchain was used only for transactions, to store transactions. This person sent so much money to this person. That was all stored on the blockchain. He established the big innovation of running programs, distributed apps on a blockchain. And that, properly speaking, marks Bitcoin blockchain 2.0. And that is the thing which most of us believe will go on for years and decades to come. Whether Bitcoin will survive is a question, but blockchain 2.0, which was dived into by this person, Vitalik, that has a definite future, which we will explore. And as I said, from then on, the things like smart contracts, distributed applications, they came into being, which altered the course of blockchain. Once again, a recap of what we just saw in the last slide. Bitcoin was launched by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009, and 2014 the Ethereum blockchain introduced by Atal and from then on, many people started proposing different kinds of blockchain for various purposes. So that marks a significant shift in paradigm. And then initial new coin offerings, people started investing in distributed technology. That was roughly beginning in 2017. And in 2020, many other applications too were explored. Non-fungible tokens, kind of digital tokens, non-fungible, therefore you cannot touch them or feel them, but they exist, digital and distributed finance and many other such things which were based on blockchain 2.0. Okay. So we saw an overview of this in the morning, that a blockchain is made of several blocks. What is contained inside each block is roughly given. Okay. We needn't go through everything, just a few things. So let's take this block n+1. It has the hash of the previous block. That is one thing which we saw in the morning itself. It will have a hash of itself, the contents of everything, hash we put over here, which is what will validate whether this block is valid or not when you look into the next block. Some details which we need not delve into. Nonce is just a random number. Nonce is a technical term for a random number. That was the nonce which a particular miner came up for this block, that is also stored here. The timestamp, that denotes the time in which this block was added into the blockchain. The difficulty target, we saw earlier, currently the target is 4 bits. The first 4 bits are supposed to be 0. Eventually we can expect that to become more difficult, it could be 5 bits, 6 bits and so on. The transactions that are contained in this book. Okay. Merkle root, it's data structure, the way things are arranged. We line up the transactions and then like we do in a binary tree, we compute the hash of 2 child nodes and put it in the parent node. Compute the hash of these 2 child nodes, put it in the parent node and so on under the Merkle root. So in case any of these transactions is tampered, we'll be able to find out just by looking at the Merkle tree, and if necessary we can trace it down to see which transaction was actually done. Quick review about this hash function which we talked about in the morning, the SHA-256, which is actually used in the blockchain. So your message could be of any length, could be more than 256 or less than 256. So we'll split it into several blocks, and if necessary we'll add some more bits to make it an integral multiple of 512 bits, and then we split the whole message into several blocks of 512 bits, each of which is parsed into a series of functions, call it a composition of functions. We feed what is called an initialization vector, and the output will be 256 bits. So we are not seeing what goes inside this function. So we are just seeing an overview of this SHA-256, which is short for secure hashing algorithm 256. 256, that denotes the number of bits that will be the output. So now this 256 is kind of becoming obsolete, and it's going to be replaced very soon by SHA-512. So this word miners, it's kind of similar to the miners who mine for gold. They spend some effort in digging in and purifying the things and handing over gold to the appropriate authority. Somewhat similar to that, these miners are the ones who verify transactions and then put them in the blockchain. Okay? So this process happens again and again and again in the blockchain every 10 minutes. So what happens? Every now and then there are some transactions that are happening which will be sent to a group of miners who are actually operating some form of computation mechanisms, and they will decide which transactions are going to be put in a block by solving a block puzzle. So this solving of a block puzzle is called proof of work. So we touched upon this in the morning. How do they solve this block puzzle? They have to find a nonce which, when appended to the appropriate place in the block, will produce a hash that has the first 4 bits as zeros. When they find such a hash, that block is put into the network. And verification. How do I know that a transaction that is being put into the block is actually valid? There are transactions which come into the network, and some of them are going to be put into the block. But someone else, like me for instance, if I want to know whether or not that is true, how will I know that it's a valid transaction? So that is the verification part. What happens is that Bitcoin operates by a thing called UTX, so unspent transactions. Okay. Now say for instance I have 5 Bitcoins and I want to send 2 Bitcoins to someone. In another wallet like GPay, you have 5,000 rupees, you want to send 2,000 rupees. That is only that transaction. You send 2,000 to someone, that is the only transaction that happens. But in Bitcoin, if I send 2 Bitcoins to someone, there are actually 2 transactions that are happening. One is the transaction which I intended, 2 Bitcoins to that person. And the other transaction is 3 Bitcoins to myself. So these 2 transactions happen simultaneously, and the earlier transactions through which I earned 5 Bitcoins does not exist anymore. Or more technically, it's not valid anymore. So the only transactions that exist now are the 2 Bitcoins which I sent to him and the 3 Bitcoins which I sent to myself, which means I have a balance of just 3 Bitcoins. So this verification actually involves comparing the transactions put in the block with that set of unspent transactions. Only those transactions which comply with the unspent transactions set are allowed to be put into the block. So that is the verification that is done by miners before being put into the block. So putting it onto the block takes place at the end of the block time, which is 10 minutes at the moment, and then the process starts over. The next set of transactions arrives and they start solving the puzzle and so on. So this goes. Okay. So now we said that there is no central authority in blockchain. In case of Indian rupees, if there is some dispute, we have the Reserve Bank of India to settle it. In case of a dispute in Bitcoin, there is no such authority to settle it. So it's completely decentralized. So in that case, when everyone is in a different place, decentralized, how do we attain consensus? Consensus is an agreement. Agreement that I actually sent 2 Bitcoins to that person, and therefore now I have 2 Bitcoins less, and that person has 2 more Bitcoins. How do we arrive at this consensus if we do not have any common authority to arbitrate it for us? It is achieved by means of this consensus mechanism, which are some algorithms used for verifying these transactions. And here we list some of the transactions that are prevalent, and we'll go through them. The first one, proof of work, is what we've been seeing so often from the morning. So we have miners to put things into the block, need to solve a puzzle, get this proof of work, and once it's verified, it's in the block. Okay. So that's okay. The advantage of this is that it's been in existence since 2008, for so many years now, almost 16 years. So it is well tested and it's known to be highly secure. In the morning we saw that it's very difficult. The probability is almost 0 and it decreases exponentially, and therefore it's very secure and well tested. It's stood the test of time, it's still working. But the problem is the high energy consumption. So as we said, it's not an ordinary smartphone or a laptop or a computer that does it. We need mining farms. Mining farms, imagine several rooms like this, each filled with very high computational power processing processes, which need an enormous amount of electricity to run, and which, as a natural consequence of the law of physics, when you convert electrical energy to do work, a lot of heat energy is released. So consuming a lot of electricity and releasing a lot of heat has been a point of criticism for this proof of work. Countries like Finland, for example, where it is estimated that 90% of the electric power that is generated in the whole of Finland goes into blockchain mining, into proof of work. So for them that is a big concern, especially when there is a lot of heat that is released. So they say instead of buying heaters, we could just buy mining farms which produce more than the required heat. And also there is this risk of centralization which goes directly against the idea of decentralization. So if it's only those who have a lot of computation power who can validate transactions, then it is equivalent to saying that only these two or those three persons are able to validate transactions. Which brings us back to something like a centralized authority. There are just a couple of people who are the authority to validate blocks. So this is kind of giving way to the next consensus mechanism, proof of stake, which is not as computationally intensive, but it's kind of costly and there is a lot of chance involved. This is something like stake, like stock market, like a gamble. So there, instead of people trying to compute, find a nonce, compute the hash and come up with the next block, they stake some of the coins they have. And then there is a function which will decide who is the one who is going to validate this block. And that person does all the verifications and he puts all these transactions onto the block. So there is not too much of computation here. So it's easy on the energy and the heat things. But it's a bit pivoted on the chance. And once again, there is the risk of centralization. It's something like bidding. There are a lot of people here who want to say, I want to create the next block on the blockchain. And so we all bid with a price. I'm willing to stake so much to Bitcoins so that I get to put the next Bitcoin onto the block. And obviously the one who has the highest bid is going to win. And all the bids of everyone else is lost. Okay? So in the case of proof of work, you expend energy and then maybe you get to put the block on the blockchain and you get incentive, or maybe you fail and you lose the money that you spent in expending all that electrical energy. In this case, you don't expend energy, but you still lose money. So we are submitting bids, the highest bidder wins, and everyone else loses their money. But at least it is easy on the environment in that it doesn't consume too much electricity and it doesn't release too much. Once again, there is the risk of centralization. The one who is very rich, who is able to bid most coins, tends to win most of the time. And so, the next thing called delegated proof of stake was instead of having everyone bid, let us have some time. Like for this next 1 hour, let us all vote and decide that these two are the delegates who will actually verify the transactions and put it on the blockchain. For the next hour, let us have some other vote and decide that maybe these two are the designated verifiers who will verify the transactions and put it on the blockchain. So the things which some delegate verifies are put on the blockchain and things which no one verifies are discarded, which is an improvement to the previous proof of stake in that not everyone wastes money. It is just a couple of people who are going to bid, who are going to stake, and therefore the loss is less. But once again, as you can see, it is even more centralized than the last version. So a group of people decide whom they want to stake as their candidate, who will in turn stake for which block to be included in the blockchain. Another consensus mechanism, practical Byzantine, that is practical Byzantine fault tolerant, is not suited for public blockchains. It's only suited for private blockchains, or what we call permission blockchains, things which run within an organization. For instance, we have, this is an art institute, and everyone is known to everyone else. We have faculty, we have non-teaching faculty, staff, we have students and other people, but everyone is known to everyone. So we designate a few people instead of the voting that we had in the designated proof of stake, where people cast their votes to elect who's going to be the candidate. We ourselves designate who is going to be the candidate who will verify. And this process has 5 different stages that you can see here. And it operates by, in the first stage, one of the clients sends its transaction request to a node, and in the next stage, that forwards it to everyone else except itself. And each of that is forwarded to everyone else except that node itself in the successive stages. Finally, at the end, the reply from the appropriate nodes are compared, and if they are all consonant, if they are all viable, they all agree with each other, then that block is put into the blockchain. So this completely does away with decentralization. The only decentralization is that it's not just one person who's doing it. Okay? But it is very good with performance. We don't need to wait for anyone to cast votes, we don't need to wait for anyone to stake, we don't need to wait for the function to output who is going to be the actual designated verifier. We just have the algorithm ready, we can even hardwire it. Once we decide who is going to be the constituent nodes who are going to verify, things happen very fast. The only backside is that, the downside is that there is no decentralization, it's completely centralized. Proof of authority is the equivalent of the last one, but in public cases. Once again, it's the same. In the network, there is someone who's decided who is going to be the single authority. In the last case, there were a couple of people, and all of their outputs, intermediate outputs, were compared, and then was decided whether to put it on the blockchain or not. In this case, there is just one person who is given the full authority, but that person is chosen from someone in the network itself. So once again, it's a variant of that practical Byzantine fault-tolerant model, but this is once again doing away with the decentralization in view of a better performance. Many other things, many of the latencies are done away with, but it compromises with decentralization. We present a comparison of the consensus mechanisms that we have here. So as you can see, there is nothing like one good mechanism which satisfies everyone or which is suitable for all applications. We have to see what kind of application that we need and then choose the mechanism that is best suited to that. So if you are running a mechanism where energy is not at all a concern, you can spend as much energy as you want, but only security is the concern, decentralization is the concern, then you choose proof of work. Okay? It's completely decentralized and it's been there for quite a while now. It's practically beyond any tampering, so we choose that. On the other hand, if energy consumption is a big concern for you in small countries or small organizations, you cannot afford to spend so much, and you're running it inside an organization like in a permission blockchain, so everyone there is known to you, so trust is not a problem, and therefore you can afford to be centralized, and your performance is the only concern that you have. Then you go for something like Byzantine fault tolerant or proof of authority. So moving on, why are cryptocurrencies banned in some countries? There are these regulatory concerns. For instance, in the morning we saw that identities are completely separated from transactions. So, for instance, there is there is some weapon was bought by someone, and the Reserve Bank of India wants to know who purchased this weapon. So they could just walk into the shop of that the store and ask for the transaction number which paid for that weapon. They could go to the bank and say, so this transaction originated from this account. Who is the owner of this account? The bank has all your KYC records, and they can tell you there is this person at this place and it happened at this time. That cannot happen with blockchain. In blockchain, none of that is stored. The only thing is stored is from address 1010, 10 bitcoins was transferred to address 010. With this, nothing can be done. No one, including the miners, no one knows whom this 1010 or the address 0101 belongs. Okay. So governments are a bit concerned about that. It is impossible to trace the identities, and therefore such a system of currency could be used for purchasing weapons like this, could also be used for tax evasion. Unless your money comes through a bank, your salary and income comes through a bank, the government does not have any way to track how much money you earned, and therefore how much tax you are supposed to pay, and therefore how much tax you have paid and how much tax you have evaded. All of these are complete blank if you resort to things like cryptocurrencies. So tax evasion is a possibility with cryptocurrencies. And money laundering for the same reasons. You could send it to Bitcoin is universal. There is no conversion fee anywhere. No one can. The transaction cannot be traced from this country to this country or anything at all. So things like these are made very easy with Bitcoin, and therefore certain countries are not in favor of cryptocurrencies. And the next thing is financial stability. So in the morning we saw that in 2010 a Bitcoin was around 4 rupees, and now it's around 83 lakhs. And we can't say that it was constantly on the increase. It did not monotonously increase. There were ups and downs all through the place. And the developing countries especially will be very hesitant to adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender. Because if you base your finance on something that is so volatile, something that is so unpredictable, then when this currency collapses, your entire economy might collapse. And therefore, once again, especially in developing countries, Bitcoin is frowned upon. Any cryptocurrency is frowned upon. Environmental impact, we already saw. Most of the consensus mechanisms, if you're emphasizing on security, then you need enormous computation power, which means a lot of electricity is diverted there, and a lot of heat is also generated, which impacts the environment and draws criticisms towards some of the consensus mechanisms. And then there is this innate fear that people who do not have sufficient understanding of Bitcoin, of blockchain, people who cannot differentiate between Bitcoin and blockchain. Like I said, blockchain is a technology, Bitcoin is one of the fruit of the technology, and either could go either way, good and bad. There are some people who intricately believe that anything that is related to blockchain or Bitcoin is bad because of certain bad things that have happened in the past. And so that has led to a lot of regulations and even bans in certain countries. For instance, this is a kind of map showing where all Bitcoin has been accepted, where it is being tolerated, and where it is being downright forbidden. Countries like China, they consider money laundering and tax evasion a big deal, and so they completely ban Bitcoin there. There are countries in which it is kind of tolerated, and there was this El Salvador in America. That was the first country in 2021, I think, which adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender. You can pay the government itself in Bitcoin. So there are some people who accept it, seeing some of the websites, And there are some countries who have mixed opinions about that and therefore reject. Okay, at least I found this a bit funny, but you might find this silly. The thing is, every year the 22nd of May is celebrated as Bitcoin Pizza Day because of, I just forget the name of this person. It is something like Laszlo Onassis, I think. Need to look it up. So this person was a computer programmer, and in May 22nd of May 2010, when Bitcoin was just coming up, it was worth almost nothing. He had some thousands of Bitcoin, and he went to Florida in his a pizzeria that was just outside his college and bought 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins, which in that day's worth was around $41. So 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins, which was $41. And in today's worth, those 10,000 Bitcoins are worth about 8,347 crores of rupees, which is more than enough to feed the whole world with pizzas for a few days. And then this new word. There was a Bitcoin forum in which there were investors in Bitcoins. They were having some discussions, and there was a time when Bitcoin was plummeting, it was going down, and some fellow had asked for advice about whether to keep a Bitcoin or to sell it. And one of the cryptomaniacs, this was a typing mistake. Instead of typing HOLD, he typed HODL, and that became like a buzzword which was copied to many other cryptographic forums, and now it's been an officially recognized term in Bitcoin. It's pronounced HODL. It's been given the pronunciation HODL, and it was even named as an acronym for Hold On for Dear Life, and that denotes the set of people who invest in Bitcoin and they hold on to Bitcoin even when it's plummeting, even when it's going downhill. They do not wish to sell it, they just want to hold on to it. And that's become a culture which came out of a typing mistake. And finally, there is this group of enthusiasts who are not really aware of cryptocurrency, of the underlying blockchain or cryptocurrency or anything, but they're just overconfident, thinking that they know everything, and they think that Bitcoin will definitely take over the world and change the world, and they go around advising everyone to invest in Bitcoin without fully understanding the implications or the downsides of it. But even with all that, there are many industries which have adopted Bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies like Ether, Zether, Ripple Coin, each having its own properties. And we can say that that does seem to be increasing. More and more industries, various industries like telecommunications, finance, health monitoring, logistics, they are all constantly on the increase and adapting Bitcoin, even though we are not very sure about the future. Okay. So with that, I think we'll finish this session. If there are any questions, we can take them. Otherwise, we'll take a break now, and then we'll meet for the next session, which will be some research topics on blockchain. In case it's not ready, shall I start the next session? So you tell me if it's ready and okay. Okay, so apparently your refreshments are still not ready, and probably we'll continue with the next session. Unless you have, does anyone have any questions with this?
Sir, in proof of work, is there any methodologies we are?
Is there any methodology?
In proof of work, is there any methodologies we are working on that, sir?
We are working on.
Is there any methodologies we are using in proof of work?
Yes, the way proof of work works is we find the nonce. So this is what goes into each of the block in the blockchain. So proof of work is about finding this thing, a nonce. Nonce is a random number. Okay? So what you do is you construct everything in this block except the nonce. Except the nonce, you fill up everything else. Previous block's hash, all the transactions that would go here, the time at which this is going to be added, everything. And then you use some random number, 349. And then you hash this whole thing and see whether this hash has the first 4 bits as 0. If the first 4 bits are 0, then fine. You can put the block immediately onto the blockchain. In case that doesn't work out, you replace this nonce with something else. Instead of 349, you try with some other random number, 1987. See whether hashing dot gives you a hash which has first 4 bits 0. You keep on doing this with different nonces, with different random numbers, until you hit some hash with first 4 digits as 0. Once you do that, you immediately put the block on the blockchain. The first miner who does that gets the reward. So this is the method that is followed by proof of work.
How about that Merkle root?
Yes, sir.
Merkle root, sir.
So that is a data structure. It is a way of arranging things so that in case of some error, you can find out immediately which thing went wrong. Okay. So I believe you know about binary trees. And so binary tree is one in which each parent will have 2 child nodes. Okay. So we have all the transactions at the leaf level. And then we club each 2 transaction, find the hash of it and put it on top and the parent. Similarly the other side, 2 transactions, find the hash of it, put it over there. Now hash these 2 nodes, put it on its parent and so on. So now later on, if someone tries to change this transaction to PX2, that path will become invalid. So it is easy to track which transaction is wrong. When I open the block, I see something wrong. I see the root is wrong. If I examine these 2, I find out that this is wrong. If I examine these 2, I find out this is wrong. So it is reaching the compromised transaction very quickly. For that arranging, it's called Merkle tree, and the top one is called the Merkle root.
So the Merkle root will refer the previous one.
Yes, this is the one that is actually stored here, the previous one.
This is the only way we assured all the transactions are stored in blockchain concept more secure.
This is
The only the assured way all the transactions are stored in blockchain concept in more secure way.
Yeah, in Bitcoin, this is the way. Bitcoin is not the only cryptocurrency. There are many cryptocurrencies. They run on different blockchains. Like Ether, for instance, Ether is a cryptocurrency that is running on the Ethereum blockchain. That they use proof of stake. So that structure will be different. That mechanism is different. Everything is different. Any more questions? Is my entire presentation in this computer? Come to the other folder, please. There is another window open. There is another explorer. Alright, so we'll start with the third presentation, in which we'll see some of the research directions. So each of these corresponds to some of the research that I did in the past. One will be on public key infrastructure, and then the second is improving the efficiency of this public key infrastructure, and finally the nexus of zero knowledge proof in blockchain. So we'll start with the first, public key infrastructure, which touches upon what I talked about in the first section in the morning, about symmetric key crypto systems, in which there are two different keys, one for encryption and the other for decryption. Okay? So you see here two parties, Alice and Bob. Alice wants to send a message in insecure channel to Bob. Okay? So as we said, the message is encrypted using a public key. The public key is available to everyone, and the message itself is sent through an insecure channel. Since it is encrypted, it cannot be opened by anyone else. The decryption is done with the private key of Bob to open it. So that is the asymmetric key cryptographic system. But why do we need this? We already have a symmetric key crypto system in which we use the same key for encryption and decryption. So why do we want to go something that is more complicated, that uses two keys?
Because key sharing is not possible.
Excellent. Okay. So why do we need this? Say for instance, so I have this message which I want to encrypt by means of some function, to which I apply a key which produces the ciphertext. This ciphertext is given to the decryption algorithm, which also requires the same key in order to retrieve the message. So this is a symmetric key crypto system using same key to encrypt and decrypt. This presupposes that this key is present both on the sender side and on the receiver side. Okay? Only if I have the key on both sides, it is possible to encrypt and decrypt. Now, how do we agree upon a key? How do both of us decide that this is the key that both of us are going to use? How do we agree upon a common key? Normally what happens is, from my side I will generate this key and I need to give it to you. I need to give it to you saying, this is the key which you have to use to decrypt my message. But how do I give it to you? If you are living just next door, I could walk and give it to you. If you are next street, I can walk and give it to you. But if you are living in the next continent, how do I securely give this key to you without anyone else reading it? If I send it by email, if I send it by post, if I give it through someone else, it is all liable to be open and they too have the key. So how do I share this key to you without meeting you at all, if you're far away. That is where this asymmetric key crypto system is required. There is something, do you mind closing it? Some box. So that is why we need this asymmetric key crypto system to share the key. In practice, everything is hybrid. In real time, it is not that asymmetric key will replace symmetric key crypto system. That cannot happen. Both have to work hand in hand for any secure communication to happen. Okay, so what do we mean by hybrid? In any system, the first thing will happen by asymmetric, in which the key for the symmetric encryption system is shared. Okay? So what happens? We have the key, which itself is the message that is going to be shared. The very first step, the public key is used to encrypt the symmetric key. The key that is going to be used for the actual message, in which I am going to send some confidential message, do this, do that. Okay, this is my actual message. In order to send this, I need to send the key. That key I am first going to encrypt. With what am I going to encrypt? With my public key. So with the sender's public key. Then I send this ciphertext to the other side, where it is decrypted using the private key, and on decrypting you receive the key. Now both me and the receiver have the key, and we are ready to start sending and receiving messages that are encrypted and decrypted with this symmetric key. Okay. So asymmetric key is the first step, and symmetric key is the second step. Generally, this is very expensive because it involves exponentiations. This is very expensive. Symmetric key does not involve any expensive, it only has linear operations, and therefore it is affordable. We do not use this too much, we use this only when it is unavoidable. Like in this case, key exchange is unavoidable, and therefore we have to use asymmetric key for key exchange. Okay. Now, normally you will want to update your keys every now and then. Your bank it says your keys are 180 days old, your passwords are 180 days old, you have to update it. So similarly, you will want to update both this public key and this private key. I mean the key you use for symmetric key encryption and the key that you use for asymmetric key encryption. You will want to update both for security and privacy. Now when you do that, how are you going to convince someone else? So today I tell you that my public key is 100 something. After 3 days I tell you my public key is 010 something. After 1 year I tell you something. Now how can I convince you? You're not here near me to convince. You're somewhere else, and maybe you're receiving an email from someone saying, I'm Amalan, I have updated my key on this day from this to that. Now how can you trust me? How can you trust this email? And also, how do you disseminate? So there may be anyone anywhere in the world who wants to send a message to me. How do I tell everyone that I have updated my key? I can't send emails to everyone in the world saying I have updated my key. Every time I update my key, that's not possible. So convincing was the other thing. And how to retain identities, which kind of ties up with the second one. If you receive an email saying I am Amalan, I have updated my key, what credibility does that email have? How can you be sure that it is actually from you? To answer these questions, we have what is called a public key infrastructure. Okay? It's an infrastructure that deals with public keys. So it is a set of programs, policies, other hardware, and many other things, and that serves the purpose of creating or registering the public keys, storing it, disseminating it, and revoking it. So if I receive an email from someone saying I have changed my public key or I have registered a new public key, I need to have some means of ensuring that it is true or that it is not. I need to know. This public key does that. If at all I want to communicate with someone, I just go to this public key infrastructure and see what is this person's public key. And in case that person updates his public key, this infrastructure should know that he has updated, so that when I ask it what is the public key, it should be able to tell me this is this person's public key. And it binds the public key with the owning identities, which means what I just said. In case the user updates the public key infrastructure should know. And when anyone queries the public key infrastructure, the PKI, it should be able to correctly say that this person has updated the latest public key. Okay. So there are many conventional models of realizing this. The very first thing was certificate authority, which was based on this X.509 standard, which has a trusted third party. And that is an authority who issues certificates. The certificate has some format, the data that needs to be in that, and that contains a certificate saying this public key is owned by this person. Okay, so we travel by train. The authority asks for some identity proof, and we show that I'm a teacher at this college. So this college management, that is the certificate authority, and the certificate they give us is the identity card. Once I show this to the train ticket checker, he accepts that this person is an employee of this institute. This is his name, this is his address, and so on. Okay. So similarly, have you seen this anywhere so far? Okay, this is an example of, this is not a certificate, it's just displaying the certificate. Next time you log into any browser, like Chrome for instance, try checking it. If you visit any website, if that website had obtained a certificate, that would have something like this. On the address bar, just while you start typing the address, like www, just to its left, you will see a kind of icon. If you click on it, you will actually do it here. In case you have not seen it, it will be an exercise. Just go to some website. You see this icon over here? So you click on that, and you see this first thing, connection is secure, which means this website has obtained a certificate. So you click on that. You see this certificate is valid, and you click on that, and you see something like this. Okay. So it shows this certificate has been obtained from an authority called Google Trust Services, and it has issued this certificate to this website google.com, the date on which it was issued, the date on which it will expire, and some other keys. And at the very last, you see this public key. Okay, so this certificate issued by Google Trust Services tells us that google.com is really the owner of this public key. This public key is very big. Okay, so this certifies to us that this certificate is owned by google.com. So that was the very first kind of public key infrastructure that came into being. Some authority issues a certificate that attests to us the ownership of keys. But there was an event in 2011. There was a Dutch certificate authority called DigiNotar, which was hacked into by some people from Iran, and they issued fake certificates to many websites, including things like Google, Yahoo and other things, they issued fake certificates, and that became a big cry. Even high profile domains like Google had been issued fake certificates by someone. So that had started casting doubts on certificate authorities. Because what happens is, what would happen if I get hold of the ID card printing machine of this college? I can issue fake identity cards to thousands of people, to whomever I want, create fake identities. So that's what happened here. When a digital certificate authority is hacked into, you can create several fake certificates and that corrupts the entire system. You can make the valid certificates invalid and invalid certificates is valid. So true certificates can be made false, false can be made true. So all of those happen because of single point of failure. Everything hinged on that one authority. If you corrupt that, everything that is based on that is completely collapsed. Okay? And revocation, like if there is some website which for some misbehavior has been, its certificate has been revoked, managing that with digital certificate was cumbersome. We needed to have revocation lists, which itself was a headache, and multiple CAs undermine identity retention. So I said that this is a certificate authority in Hungary. So there is a certificate authority in US, there is one in India. Now I am Amalan in India, there may be some other Amalan in the US, some other Amalan in Hungary, and all of us are saying this is my public key, that is my public key. Now, how will someone who wants to communicate with Amalan know whether this Amalan is from this country or that country? The identity is confused because there are different certificate authorities, each authority attesting to one person. So that person's identity is undermined. So people started exploring for other solutions to PKI other than certificate authority. One of the first things that came up was called Web of Trust, WOT. So that decentralized trust. So it says if you have just one person at the top, it's easy to corrupt it and then everything collapses. So why not decentralized trust? Have many people decide on who can be trusted and not. So the way this particular technology worked was if A trusts B and B trusts C, then A trusts C. So if you are trusted by someone in a chain, then you can enter the network. So that is the way that you can enter a network, and eventually these chains will grow in directions, become an integrated web of trust, which was WOT. The problem with this was that the entry into the network was very difficult. You cannot enter into the network until at least one of the members of the network trusts you. So that is not very friendly. If you are trying to enter a network, there is no one who trusts you, then you cannot enter the network account. So what is the use of it? And once again, there is no identity retention. There are all independent chains, and there might be one person with a particular name in this chain and some other person with the same name in this chain having some other key, which once again undermines identity. So it was in this kind of scenario that blockchain was becoming popular of its own accord for cryptocurrencies. And some of the properties that we saw in the morning was that it was actually created for Bitcoin. And one property was that transactions are regularly committed onto the blockchain at regular intervals of time. And once they are committed, tampering that is impossible. And not only that, the consensus is in a decentralized environment. It's not instantaneous, so that's a 10-minute lag, but it is decentralized. I mean, there is no central authority whom you can corrupt. There is no such thing as you just corrupt this, then everything falls. Such a thing does not exist in blockchain. So people started wondering, can this be used to solve the issues on a PKI? The issues that we've seen so far is there is a central authority whom if you corrupt, everything goes. and it's not possible to get in unless you establish trust in someone. That thing also is not here. And this thing, there is no tamper possible once things are committed onto the blockchain. So can these properties be used to build a PKI? So that is the birth of a PKI that is based on blockchain. Okay. So people started thinking, instead of transactions, instead of X sends so many bitcoins to B, instead of having that as a transaction, have things like registering, updating and revoking keys as transactions. The public key of X is so and so. Have that as a transaction. X has updated its public key from 100 to 001. Have that as a transaction. The public key of X has been revoked. Have that as a transaction. And if you put it on a blockchain, it cannot be tampered. It cannot be edited. It's transparent, anyone can verify it at any time. And if there is only one blockchain, there is identity retention. You cannot have, like we said in the morning, we cannot have multiple transactions. We cannot have double spending in blockchain. Where one transaction is forked into two, that's not possible. Which means identity forking or aliasing is also not possible. So we also achieve identity retention. So why not use blockchain to build a public key infrastructure? So research started in that direction, and many designs were proposed. Many have, each had its own advantages and disadvantages. And one particular thing which we chose for our research was a PKI for IoT-based healthcare services. This particular thing was chosen because we are talking of IoT devices which have limited power. And there are people who say that the life of an IoT device is proportional to the life of its battery. If it's going to consume too much battery and it's going to go into sleep mode or it's going to die out, then there's no purpose in building such an automated, such an IoT network or such an automation. So we need to construct a system which can save power and also limited memory. IoT devices typically have lesser memory, and their power computation is to be used for communicating, for making decisions. We cannot afford to go and ask them to save hundreds of public keys, verification things, and to run complicated algorithms to verify signatures. That is not possible. So if you want to achieve security on top of its IoT's automation, that should have a minimal overhead. If you run an IoT device, if an IoT device needs to take say 2 seconds to make a decision, and to achieve security you take 10 seconds, that is pointless. The time you take for achieving security should be milliseconds or microseconds or something negligible that is unnoticeable compared to the time taken for computations. So using a blockchain for this scenario is promising because the only overheads are storing the keys for that particular transaction. Like if I want to send some data from this device to someone else, I don't need to store the keys of everyone else. I just need to query the blockchain for the key of this particular identity. Get it, store it for as long as the data transmission is happening, and then you can erase it. And all I need to do is run some lightweight software, like you would have GPay, which is a lightweight software to carry out financial transactions. Similar to that, similar to a Bitcoin wallet, I have some lightweight software to query the blockchain to get the updated state of public key of any identity. Okay. So this was the thing which we chose, and I'll give you the reference of the paper. If you're interested, you could go through it. The mechanism we used to test it was, the setup we used to test it was this computer, and we used a language called Solidity and get this an interface for Windows to interact with the MISC wallet. And so we did a study, and we saw that it does comparatively better with the other ones, PKIs modeled on certificate authorities and with Web of Trust. The main advantage here is that most of the computations are not done on the IoT devices themselves. Everything is on the blockchain. Storage is on the blockchain. Verification on the blockchain. Everything is on the blockchain. The only thing the IoT device has to do is query the blockchain. Ask for the blockchain. What is the public key of this person? You get it, do your data transaction, and that's it. Okay. So I'm sharing these details in case any of you would like to research into these things. Be happy to collaborate. Okay, so that is one thing, public key infrastructure that is based on blockchain. Any questions on this? Or do you notice anything here which you think could be improved? The next thing I'm going to talk about is an efficient public key infrastructure, which is taking this setup and improving a couple of things. By any chance, are you able to guess two things which we could improve here?
Scaling.
Sorry?
Scaling.
Scaling, yes, very good. Okay. Very good.
Computation.
Computations for verifications. Okay. So what happens was, so let's say there are 5,000 new identities who want to register their public keys on the blockchain. You need to make 5,000 transactions. Now let's say the capacity of a block is 1,000 transactions. You need to add 5 new blocks onto the blockchain. In a week, there are 10,000 more new identities who want to enter the blockchain. You need to add 10 more blocks. And then these people, they want to update their keys, some keys get revoked. Each of this will count as a transaction. Updating or adding or revoking, each of this counts as a transaction. And as time progresses, there will be many transactions. Many people will be added, people will update, some people will get revoked, and it keeps on increasing. So if you want to store everything, you need a linear, you need storage that increases linearly with time. Okay? As many transactions, the storage is proportional to the number of transactions that happens. Okay? And also verification. Okay? So there is this IoT device here. It wants the key of identity X. So it has to go to the blockchain, start from the very first block, go through all the transactions to see if there is identity X. It's not there, so go to the second block and see if it's there. Go to the third block and so on. Traverse the entire length of the blockchain, which could keep growing into hundreds, thousands, and over years it will become exponential. So these two are things which take a lot of time. Storing, which increases with the number of transactions, and then verification. I mean, someone tells this identity, I am Namalan and this is my key. The only way to verify it is to make a linear traversal through the blockchain. So these are two things which could be improved. Okay. So for that we use what's called an accumulator, which is data structure, we could say. It is a compact representation of a set of elements and a binding commitment to the set. Okay, let me explain what this means. Okay. I'll give a very small example, not really the accumulator which we use, just a small example so that we understand what an accumulator is. So for simplicity, please forget about the number of bits that is required to store an integer and all that, just forget it. Let us say I can only store one integer. I can store only one integer, but I want to store 3 integers. I'm purposely choosing prime numbers to explain this. Okay. So I have a set of integers and I want to store them here, so that when there is someone else here who asks me, is 3 included in the set, is 5 included in the set, 7 included in the set, is 11 included in the set, he should just look at this and be able to conclude yes or no for all these. Can you think of a way? I have here and here I have these numbers 5, 7 and 11. There is someone else there who has these 4 questions. Is 3, 5, 7 and 11 included or not? If he directly asks me, he will have to ask me 4 questions. 3, 5, 7, 11. So there are 4 questions which I answer. Some of which I answer yes, some of which I answer no. Instead of doing that, I want to write just one integer here, and that integer should be able to answer all of his questions in one go. Can you think of a number and explain why? I'm giving you the clue. I'm purposely choosing prime numbers everywhere. Okay, so I just multiply these 3. 5 times 7 is 35. Multiply that with 11, it is 385. So I store 385 here. Okay. So now this fellow, if he wants to know whether 3 is included in the set or not, he just divides this by 385 by 3. Okay. Does it divide? Does 3 divide 385? No. Okay. So this is not included there. Thus, is 385 divisible by 5? Yes. So 5 is included there. Is 385 divisible by 7? Yes. 7 is included. Is 385 divisible by 11? Yes. So 11 is included. Okay. So just by having one number, I am able to answer 4 questions in one go. Just think of the amount of communication that has been reduced from him to me, from me to him, saying yes, no and everything. I just made one computation, so I have one computation here, one communication here. He had one communication from here to query the blockchain, or to query this number, and he has the answers to everything. Okay. Now let's say I make a change here. I do not want 7 anymore. So now I have only 5 and 11. So what should I update here? I've made a change in my set. I've removed 7. So now the only elements I have are 5 and 11. So what should be my new number over here? 55. Okay. So now once again he can query. We can query whether there is 5, 3, 5, 7, 11. For 3 he'll get a no. For 7 he'll get a no. For these 2 he'll get a yes. Okay. So every time I update, either add elements or remove elements, if I make just one change here, that is enough to answer all the questions. Okay. So now extend this idea to this. Instead of numbers, I have pairs. This identity's key is this. Identity X is public key is 100. Identity Y is 101. Z is 110 and so on. Okay. Now whether this is valid and included in the blockchain or not, I can do something of this sort. Okay? Instead of storing each of these as separate records, I can do some operation like this and store just the result of that over there. And anyone who wants to verify doesn't have to come to me, and ask 3 different questions. He can just look at that, and with one computation, he can compute whether it is involved there or not. Is the idea clear? See, in the case of numbers, I had multiple numbers. I did one computation. Here the computation I did was multiplication. So I did one computation and I had one round of communication to store the result at some place. And when anyone wanted to know whether this is included or not, he just ran one round of communication from here and he did one computation here and he got the answer. Okay. Now this is more advanced level. Instead of numbers, I have pairs like this. Public key of X is this thing. Public key of Y is this thing and Z is this thing. Now instead of storing things just like these numbers, I'll do some computation. What that computation is, that's another detail. So I'll do some computation, I'll get a result. That result, I spend just one round of communication to store that. And this fellow, when he wants to know whether is that something like Z110, is that included in the blockchain or not, he just retrieves this. Whatever number is here, he retrieves this, does some computation like this, and at the end, he will know whether this is included in the blockchain or not. Okay? So see how efficient we've made it. We just have 2 computations, 2 communications. With that, now these people, it could be hundreds or thousands or anything, depending on what kind of computation you're doing, we can accommodate as many people as we want. But we have reduced the computation and the communication to just 2 or a constant. So from this, earlier we had order of n, we had order of n, now we have reduced it to a constant. Sorry, this verification we have reduced it to a constant. Okay, we don't need to go to every single block, we don't need to verify every single transaction. And the storage as well. What are we storing? The only thing we are storing here is one result. We are not storing this whole pair, 3 pairs there or 100 pairs there. We are just storing one thing. So both the storage and the verification are reduced from linear to a constant. Okay. But what exactly are these computations? What exactly are we storing there? That is a bit more involved and we need to go into greater detail. I'm not sure if we'll have enough time to do that. So, if you're interested, you please contact me and we'll take over it. So, just rush over to the next one. So, these are some of the algorithms that we use for this computation and storing. We use what's called an accumulator, and the computations we do is we compute, we concatenate an identity with its public key and then map it to a prime. We multiply it with some other odd primes and then we update the state of the accumulator with a new project. Okay. So that turns out to be a field element which, like this prime number, will not be divisible. You need not have any worry that there might be a number here which is not divisible by 3 but 3 is included. When the numbers are prime, it is guaranteed that it is not divisible by 3, 3 is not included. Okay. So similarly, there are some properties in discrete maths which we use to ensure that we don't get a false positive result. Okay. So we changed the way that this blockchain works. So earlier in the last question, we saw that we just post identity and the key facts onto the blockchain. Here we break it down into 5 different steps, some of which happen offline and some of which happen online. We see some things are online and some things are offline. But at the end, what we achieve is a mechanism that is as secure as the previous one. That is, it's on the blockchain, so it cannot be tampered, and there is also communication and storage efficient. Okay. So here we present the results. We took a paper by a computer scientist at MIT who has this version of blockchain, and the optimizations that we did here, I give the explanation of what all these variables mean. And you see that the optimization we achieve here. Okay, so this work was submitted to the Journal of Discrete Mathematical Sciences and Cryptography, and it's under revision, and so I don't have a citation yet. It's yet to be published. Okay. So moving on to the last one, the zero knowledge proof. So this cryptography is, most people mistake cryptography to be only about encryption, decryption and hashing and things of that sort. It's true that cryptography started with encryption, decryption, hashing and all that, but modern cryptography as it stands today has long since transcended all these narrow confines of just encryption and decryption and has forked off into several advanced branches, of which one of this is zero knowledge. Okay. Is this term familiar? Anyone heard of it already? Yes. Okay. So it was invented, coined by these three people in 1999, and once again has come a long distance from what they started in those ages. So the name implies it is proving in zero knowledge. Okay. Say for instance, there is a very difficult Sudoku puzzle in a paper, and there is an award of $10 million if you solve it. Now you have solved it, and you want to prove to me that you know the solution. So how will you prove it to me? How will you prove that you know the solution to that Sudoku puzzle? You will write the numbers in the square and show to me that you know. I will verify that it's correct, and then I'll be convinced that it's true. But the underside effect here is that now I too know the solution. You wrote the solution and you showed it to me. Now I too know the solution. In the course of proving that you know the solution, you have leaked some information. Now I too know it. Now I can show the solution to someone else and say, I solved it. So give me the award of 10. So this zero knowledge proof is to avoid things like that. How to prove something to someone without leaking any information. So ideally, what should have you done? You should prove to me somehow, and at the end, I should not know anything. I should not know even how to fill one square of the puzzle. Then both I would have been convinced, and you would not have leaked any information. Okay? Zero knowledge proof. So that is one kind of example. The classical example given to illustrate zero knowledge proof is this. So we have two people, a verifier and a prover. This prover wants to prove that these two balls are of different colors. Okay. Now what is the easiest way to prove two balls are of different colors? You just give it to me and then see that they are of different colors. But now I know that the colors of the ball, one is red and one is blue. So you want to prove to me that the balls are of different colors without letting me learn that the balls are red and blue. So how will you do it? The verifier, you blindfold my eyes so that I cannot see the balls, and then I take the balls in my hands. So I have the red ball in my right hand, the blue ball in my left hand. I take it behind my back and I swap them, or no, so I have two choices. Either I can swap the balls or I can just have it as such. And then I bring it back in the front and I show it to you and ask you, did I change or not? So take the balls, I change or don't change, and then bring it back and show to you, did I change the balls or not? If you answer correctly, it means the balls were of different colors. Only if they were of different colors, you'd be able to tell me that they were changed. Imagine both were red in color, you would not be able to tell me whether I changed or not, because both will look the same to you. If there are different colors, you will see that they get interchanged. Or so you'll be able to answer correctly. So that is, now once again, it might be possible that you are just lucky. I changed it and you luckily guessed that I changed. So there is a probability of R. So this is a kind of experiment that must be repeated multiple times to avoid that. Say we repeat this experiment 100 times and all 100 times you guess it correctly. Then the possibility of you lying is very less. Okay? If you make a mistake even once, then I will conclude that you were just guessing, you were lucky a few times, but now you are wrong. So that was the earliest kind of zero knowledge protocols which had a false probability of half and therefore had to be repeated multiple times to reduce the error probability. But present day zero knowledge proofs are not like that. Just one run of the protocol is enough to achieve negligible probability of falsehood. Okay? So the examples were with balls and Sudoku, but in real life, what we need is something like this. Okay? Might have heard of NP hard problems and so on, problems which are difficult to solve. Say I have a solution which is solution to the problem. Now I want to prove it to you. I have a solution for graph coloring problem, or I have a solution for satisfiability. Now how do I prove that I have a solution that satisfies this equation? To prove it, we need to run a protocol. In that protocol, I should not reveal any detail about it. So that at the end of the protocol, the verifier accepts that I know such a solution, but does not learn anything about the solution. Not just the solution, the verifier doesn't learn the solution, also doesn't learn anything about the solution. For instance, doesn't learn that x is an odd number or x is a prime number. No information should be learned by the verifier. So, as part of one of the theoretical research, we attempted to construct a protocol for a matrix operation. Given a matrix X and a column vector Y transpose, how to prove that the sum of the column wise sum of all the elements of this matrix is equal to that. Okay. So I have a matrix which I won't show it to you. It will be in some encrypted form. I have a vector which will be in some encrypted form. I won't show it to you. But I'll prove to you that this hidden matrix, if you sum it column wise, you will get a vector which is equal to this hidden vector. Okay, so pretty much you don't get to learn anything. You don't get to see the matrix, you don't get to see the vector, but I'll convince you that if you add these elements column wise in this matrix, you will get this vector, both of which are placed in sealed envelopes on this table. Okay. So for that we use what is called a commitment. So commitment is like putting things in a sealed envelope and giving it to you. Okay. I write something, maybe a lottery or a number, which I should first commit but should not deny later on. So I can write it on an envelope, put it in a sealed cover and give it to you. So that is the committed. I cannot change it later. That denotes the binding property. You cannot change it later, and it's hidden. Until this transaction is over, you cannot know what it is. Okay. There is a commitment scheme called Peterson commitment, which uses a generator of field and another generator, which is this generator raised to some power. So the way it's constructed is to commit to an element x, we raise it to the power of a generator and another generator to a random number r. Okay, that completely hides it, because this element x could be now mapped into any element into this field, and if the field size is large, it's very difficult to find the original element. So that was for a number. For a vector which has n elements, we have n generators followed by a generator for the randomness. Each component of this vector is raised to the generator, and we have just one randomness which is sufficient for a vector, and also we commit to a vector. So you have a vector of n elements And in the commitment, you have just one element. You cannot find any other vector which commits to this commitment, and you cannot go the other way. From this commitment, it is not possible to find any vector which satisfies this. So once again, I'm here list the steps of the protocol. I guess we don't have to go into greater detail. Just rush to the conclusion. So what we denote by open transfer here is revealing the vector and the matrix. If I write the matrix on the board and the vector on the board, you can see for yourself that if I add the elements column wise, I arrive at this vector. But I have revealed everything, so there is no privacy there. And communication is when you're sending so many elements. If you send a matrix of order n, there are n square elements. You send so much elements over that. But other than that, the prover and the verifier don't do any computation, but there is no privacy here. And we took a base paper, one by Jens Groth, a Danish cryptographer. He proposed a method which yielded these parameters. And in our proposal, we reduced the number of communication rounds to 3. The communication was same as what Groth had done. We improved on the verifier's computation. So with the prover, you can see it has been increased by a sublinear level. It's not linear, it is sublinear. But the verifier computation has been reduced and we achieve privacy. Okay. So what's the big deal? I mean, where is blockchain involved in this? It is to make the protocol non-interactive. So in the last slide I said that our protocol uses 3 rounds of communication. We can reduce it to make just 1 round of communication like in an open transfer. In an open transfer you have just 1 round of communication, but you communicate n square elements. Using blockchain, we can reduce our communication to just 1 round and achieve order of n communication, linear communication. Okay? So the way we do that is using a primitive called the Fiat-Chauvin heuristic. It might sound a bit contradictory, but it's like predicting something that's random. Okay? As part of the protocol, if I am proving something to you, as part of the protocol, twice I'll ask you to give me some random number. Okay? A random number is something which I cannot guess by myself. So you can randomly choose any number you want and give it to me. The thing is, I should not be able to predict it in advance. But using this Fiat-Chauvin heuristic, I cannot predict it in advance, but I can compute it when necessary. Not a moment earlier than that, but at the exact moment when I need it, I can compute a completely random thing which I did not expect. Okay? So it kind of simulates a verifier. You are not there to give me a truly random number, but I am able to arrive at a truly random number which I could not have predicted even 1 millisecond in advance. Okay? So using that, we can remove this interaction part, which once again saves on the communication cost. And this final thing alone, which we term as witness, that we store on a blockchain. If we store that on a blockchain, we have the guarantee of it being tamper-free. No one can change it. So I cannot do something that is wrong. It is infallible, and there is negligible communication out there. So there is only one small thing which I put on the blockchain, one small communication from my side, one small communication from the side of the one who wants to verify. So with that we optimize a lot of things. Okay. So this is an example of the nexus of blockchain and zero knowledge proof, where one helps the other to achieve optimization and security and privacy, most importantly. So here we just listing once again the things we went over. We saw what a public key infrastructure was, a mechanism that will reliably authenticate to someone about the ownership of public keys, and then we saw about improving the efficiency of the public key infrastructure, cutting down on the storage, cutting down on the time that's taken for key verifications. And finally, we saw one example of zero knowledge proof on a blockchain that will make it efficient and preserves the privacy of the underlying data. So that concludes my talk. Are there any questions here? Any questions?